Part 9 of Interesting Tidbits from a 1910 U.S. history book. So I read chapters 6, 7, and 8 over the weekend, and here are my notes from them. Chapter 6 was Catholic Philosopher and Rebel. Chapter 7, Quaker, Yankee, and the King. And Chapter 8, The Stuarts and the Charter. All three of these chapters just focused on the different colonies and the people who started them and the trials and tribulations that each of the colonies went through. I think the main thing I got out of it was that certain colonies followed the orders of the king, like Connecticut and Rhode Island, and then the other ones wanted to do their own thing. Also, that the different colonies had different religions that were like their main religion, like the Quakers, the Puritans. There was a father and son that started, well, their last name was Baltimore, and their whole thing was they wanted to be able to practice the Catholic religion. They were called the Barons of Baltimore, and they started the colony of Maryland. I picked out a couple things that I thought were interesting. The American principle, simple in that its perfection is human liberty, is of complex make, is the sum of the ways in which a man may legitimately be free. And this one, to be governed by rulers of our own choosing and laws of our own is the fundamental privilege of our patent. And sorry, it is extremely windy, but I hate shooting these inside. And then this, it is easy to believe in our country now when it extends from ocean to ocean and is the home of 75 million human beings who lead the world in intelligence, wealth, and the sources of power. And this was written in 1910, which I don't know why I did not think that there'd be 75 million people in the United States in 1910, but that seemed like a lot to me. So then I had to go look up all the census records and see how much our population has increased. So right now we're at over 335 million. But in 1776, we had 2.5 million, which kind of blew my mind. 1861, which is the start of the Civil War, we had 31 million. And then at the end of the Civil War in 1865, we had 30 million. This also blew my mind, and I did not know it, but 620,000 people died during the Civil War. Now online for 1910, it does say that there were 92 million, and then the book is saying 75 million. But our rates of increase I thought were really interesting. So from like 1860 to 1870, our population increased by 22%. And it kept going up every 10 years. So 1870 to 1880, we went up to 30% increase. And then 25%, 21, 1910 to 1920, 15. Probably has to do with the Spanish flu. And then we start getting into the world wars. So 1920 to 1930, we only went up 13%. 1930 to 1940, only 7%. 40s to 50s, 14, 50s to 60s, 19, 60s to 70, 13, 70s to 80s, 11. And this is where it gets kind of weird. They stopped giving like the 10-year increase percentage. Now, I could probably find it. I just thought it was interesting that all of those years, they just said from the 10 years prior, this is how much our population has increased. But basically, from 1990 to 2024, that's 34 years, we have cumulatively only gone up 25%. So that's an average of 7.5% each year. Our lowest year in the United States was 1930 to 1940, and you've got the Great Depression and World War II. So we're right there. Sorry about the tangent on population. I just thought it was interesting. Thanks for listening. Follow for more. Part 10 of Interesting Tidbits from a 1910 U.S. history book, and it's getting good. We're on Chapter 9, The New Leaf, and the Blot on It. I am only going to go through half of this chapter because it got really good really quick. Because this chapter is all about the Salem witch trials. And the part I'm going to go over today mainly focuses on this guy, Cotton Mather. And I'm pretty sure the author has a personal vendetta against this guy because he writes about him scathingly. And I am not going to read with the book up like this because I do not have an external mic and it's just bad quality. That being said, if anybody has any recommendations for an external mic, please let me know. But no son of Massachusetts has so well deserved the condemnation of history as Cotton Mather himself. This man, born in 1663, was not yet 30 years of age when his campaign against the witches began. A huge memory stored with the presumptuous rubbish of libraries, and with facts which were transformed into rubbish by his treatment of them, was combined in him with a diseased imagination and a personal vanity almost surpassing belief. His mental shallowness and consequent restlessness rendered anything like original thought impossible to him, and the faculty of intellectual digestion was not less beyond him. Mather had no convictions on the subject. This is speaking of witchcraft. He was incapable of convictions of any kind, and the revelation of his private diary shows that at the very time he was wallowing in the unalivings and shrieking out for ever more victims, he was in secret doubting the truth of all religion and coquetting with atheism. And this is just my own personal thoughts, but if he was relishing in these unalivings and kind of screaming for more of them, does that make him America's very first serial? Back to the book. It is, of course, not to be imagined that he had any concept beforehand of the extent to which the agitation he was about to begin would be carried. But when evil is once let loose, it multiplies itself and gains impetus and rages like a fire. And I'm going to end this half of the chapter on a coincidence that I think is too big to be a coincidence. I just got done reading The September House by Carissa Orlando, and if you've read that, you will recognize a sentence in this book, and it's kind of crazy. Yet Cotton Mather scrupled not to put in operation these and other devices, to hound on the magistrates, to browbeat and sophisticate the juries, and to scream threats, warnings, and self-glorifications from the pulpit. Needs must when the devil drives. And that's the first half of chapter 9. Follow along for more. Part 11 of interesting tidbits found in a 1910 U.S. history book. This is the second half of chapter 9, the new leaf and the blot on it, and it's going over the rest of the Salem witch trials. And the second half of this chapter mainly focuses on Reverend Parris, his daughter, his niece, and Tituba. The author does name Reverend Parris and does name Tituba, but does not name the children. But I will. They were Elizabeth Parris and Abigail Williams. And this is the first time in the book that there is an obvious discrimination against someone of another race. And the author says that Tituba secretly ravished and fascinated them with her inexplicable powers and obscure devices. Of course, we know it didn't stop there, and the author does go back to putting the blame where it belongs, on the children and Reverend Parris and Cotton Mather. They, meaning the children, were excited by the sensation they aroused and vain of it. They were willing to do what they could to prolong it, but they hardly needed to invent anything. More than was necessary was suggested to them by questions and comments. They were quick to take hints and improve upon them. In the course of a few months, a reign of terror was established, and hundreds of people, some of them citizens of distinction, were in jail or under suspicion. 20 were on Witches Hill, west of the town of Salem, while Cotton Mather staked comfortably on his horse and assured the people that all was well. And then this is how the whole Salem witch trials concluded. John Willard, to whom the duty of arresting accused witches had been assigned, he, as a person of common sense and honesty, had intimidated his beliefs in the reality of witchcraft by refusing to arrest, and for this and no other crime he had been. Had it really come to this, that one must be unalived, for having it inferred from some act of his that he held an opinion on the subject of witchcraft different from that announced by Mather and the magistrates. It had come to precisely that, and in a community who were exiles in order to secure liberty, to have what opinions they liked. Then it was time that the witchcraft persecutions came to an end, and they did, as abruptly as they had begun. The chapter kind of concludes with the author talking about how the only reason we still know about the Salem witch trials today was that the Puritans took the whole situation to heart and realized how kind of ridiculous the whole thing had been, and that they vowed to never let something happen like that again, and to continue on the memory of this horrific event so that it couldn't be repeated. And I think that's the most important part about history and old history books, is to look back at it and to learn from history and not forget how far we've come and how far we still need to go. Follow along for more.